All right. Well, welcome to the final session of this FCI Live series, our Winter 2021 series. We're wrapping up with a scintillating topic of governance. Glad to see a lot of you agree with us that it's important and interesting and came on out. Bonnie's laughing. She got the joke. Okay. we save the best for last. What can we say? No. So we're going to be diving in on governance tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We have with us tonight Kaye Kirsch from the Firebrand Cooperative, who's going to be talking with us about a governance self-evaluation tool. Now, because we have one or two established Coops in the room, I'm going to say this tool was developed for working boards. So before the GM, a co-op's board is a working board. It actually is governance plus all the other pieces and combined. This self-evaluation is not aimed specifically at governing boards, which is what the board is once you have a general manager who is doing all the operational pieces. Right now, boards at startup food co-ops are in charge of the operational pieces as well as the governance. So they're called a working board. And this self-evaluation is aimed at those specific needs. Not that there wouldn't be a lot of use in it for established co-ops, but some of it's going to be like, wait, that's not the board's job. Well, it is at a startup. So we just wanted to give you a little pre-warning on that. And I will be assisting. Kaye has asked that we throw questions into the chat. She'll stop at certain points and take questions, and then we'll have more of them at the end, but we definitely want them. So keep on sending them over and putting them in the chat as you think of them. And with that, I think I'm going to turn things over to Kaye.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. She's going to do her magic and bring up some slides, but thank you all for coming out tonight. And we are here to talk about the board self-assessment tool. Now, first of all, Jacqueline and I will kind of be doing this together because this has been a labor of love. It is a tool that we developed when we started working on the startup handbook, or the startup leadership transition handbook. And you can fast forward to slide 3, Jacqueline. I think they know who you and I are. So we determined a need to give some additional support to startups to get them through bringing their GM on board and setting their GM up for success when they first start their co-op. And Jacqueline and I worked on this book together. And as we started digging into it, we realized that strong boards were really one of the key things that led to successful startups. So as we started thinking about what do startups need to have to be ready, we realized that they had to lay the foundation to get ready to start working with the GM. The next slide. And a big part of that readiness, one big area of readiness itself, was this board self-assessment or board functionality. How well is the board working together? Now, for startups, they're going through 3 major transitions all at once. Next slide. Oops, back one. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Back one. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. So in an open co-op, if you're going through a GM transition and transitioning from an old to a new general manager, going through that hiring or recruitment process, that's a big, hairy deal for a co-op to be going through. Or in an open co-op, if you're expanding your store or adding a second site, that's like one big capital project that takes up a lot of board time and is like a big deal for your co-op to be processing through. But startups are doing both hiring a GM, doing a huge capital project, probably the biggest one and that they've never done before. And they're also transitioning from what Jacqueline mentioned earlier, which is being this working board who has their fingers in all the pieces and are doing all the things, to being a governing board and ensuring that all that work is being done effectively through their GM. So there's a lot of things shifting and changing for boards. And we determined that as we looked at some open co-ops, and when we first built the slide deck a couple years ago, there had just been 3 pretty major closures, or 2 actually, and one was in trouble. And we started looking at the co-ops that had failed and the ones that were struggling. And we started to see some commonalities. There were some things like the market study was poor. They just didn't get the marketing right. The GM wasn't right. But almost all of them had a weak board, except for one, which is Green Top, which kind of came through their struggles with the low sales at opening and a few other challenges. And the one difference between them and some of the other co-ops is they had a really strong, healthy, engaged, and active board. Jacqueline, you know all those stories better than I do. Anything you want to add there?
No, but I think that's pretty clear. These were all co-ops that opened around 2017, some of which were highly promising, were expected to be very successful. And so, yeah, like Kaye said, we looked for commonalities, and over again, the commonality that wasn't survivable was a board that didn't know how to, either a dysfunctional board, but even a board that didn't really fully understand its job, and therefore couldn't see trouble coming when it started until much too late.
Yeah, and full disclosure, one of these co-ops, number 4, was my co-op, Prairie Roots Food Co-op in Fargo, which unfortunately closed about a year ago. So this whole project, writing the book to help co-ops avoid mistakes that we made or that I saw, has really been a labor of love and a gift we've wanted to give to the startup community. So within the context of the book, we realized that part of the problem is that co-ops didn't start getting ready for working with the GM until the moment was kind of right upon them. And we realized there was an opportunity for co-ops to maybe step back a bit, start planning a little bit earlier, and begin to build some readiness and some resilience on their own board level. So there's a couple areas we encourage them to get ready for this big transition they'll be going through. And tonight, you're going to look at the tool that we built to help boards address the board functioning area. As Jacqueline mentioned, next slide, there's 3 main areas of a co-op's work in a startup co-op. There's the governance piece. This kind of takes prominence early on when you're like getting incorporated and doing your bylaws and all of that. And then all the fun stuff starts happening, right? Let's get ownership going. Let's start looking for a site. Let's start doing the pro forma. Some of us think that's fun. Let's figure out how to finance the project. And it's all very tangible, and it feels like there's, you're making progress. There's actionable, visible steps. You feel like you're moving forward. And sometimes the governance piece gets dropped just because it's not quite as sexy and fun and cool. You don't see the tangible progress. But this stuff is incredibly important to have that strong foundation of governance. So as you go through this transition and suddenly, click the next button, the green line comes, that's your GM. And suddenly all of the culture and the ownership and the membership stuff goes to them. They're the ones communicating with the owners. They're taking care of running the business, and the board kind of swoops up, and they're now responsible for governing the co-op as a governing board. And if that happens and you haven't built the muscles and put the skills and the tools and the kind of the precedents in place to know how you're going to do this, boards can really fluster and not quite know how to manage their GM, not know how to respond to situations, not know how to respond to a crisis. So we want to set boards up for success and make sure that we have strong boards going into this stage of co-op development. So we said we need a tool. How do you know if you have a strong board? I guess you could ask around. You could, see what other people think, see what you think, but how do you really know? Is there any way we can provide a tool and make it easy for people to kind of assess themselves against the criteria that we think they would need to kind of evaluate? So we built a tool. It's a simple form. We're going to be emailing it out to you. And the way it works is you just simply ask each board member to complete this anonymously. They rate every single element on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no, this never happens, or 10 being yes, we always do this. We'll go through the details a bit later, but just to know that this board or this form will be available to you for your own use starting tomorrow if you want. Next slide. The areas that we look at in this form are the board capacity. And by that, we mean the capacity of your co-op to actually field board members and make sure you have a full board, as well as the capacity of your individual members. We've all been on those boards where one or two people does all the work, right? And that's never any fun. So making sure that the board has the capacity and you have the right number of board members to do the work that the board needs to do. Next up is board development. And this is kind of some of that fun stuff of growing and building as a board, investing in the leadership team and the board members by having ongoing development and growth happening. Policy and roles. Does everybody know what the officers are supposed to do? Does everybody stay in their lane? How does that all work? And that, of course, leads directly into board dynamics. How do you as a board work together? Are you dysfunctional or functional? Are there interesting screaming and yelling fights going on in board meetings, like we all saw a few weeks ago with that one unfortunate group that got videotaped and shared? How are boards using your time? Do your meetings end on time, or do you have like a 3 or 4 hour board meeting? And do you dread going to board meetings because you know they're going to be long and boring and a waste of your time? Accountability and delegation. How are you as a board working with each other and holding each other accountable and delegating and sharing tasks? Are you calling people to account when they say they're going to do something and they don't? Because you know what, that accountability and delegation is going to be a key part of your relationship with your GM. So practicing and having good strong skills in being honest, speaking clearly, holding people accountable is going to be really important for your co-op going forward. And then finally, as co-ops, you of course represent your owners. They're the ones who have the real power in the co-op. They've entrusted it to you. So making sure that you're meeting the responsibilities you have to your owners. So those are the high level areas. We're just going to go in quickly and kind of talk about each of the points. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I want to get to some tips about how we use the tool and then also have time for your questions. And then I will stop right here, and it looks like we do have one question from Scott asking, can we get the Google form file to assess our board in-house using your Google form file before submitting a compiled version to FCI? Currently, the assessment form is in a PDF, not a Google form. So that would not be possible at this time. And then I'm not sure about submitting a compiled version to FCI, Jacqueline.
I may have that confused, Jacqueline, from our Sunday call.
Yeah. So Scott right now is on a different call group with us, the deep dive group that is working on something similar but different.
Okay.
Oh, it is different. Okay, I thought it was the
different.
same form possibly.
Yeah, no, the one that we're working on is GM readiness, transition readiness. This is just on your board's functioning.
Some of these questions sounded very similar.
It's all connected.
Never mind.
Board muscle is definitely an overlap for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So board capacity. So this is our first one. And like I said, we're looking at, is your co-op able to keep your board full? Your seats are 90% or more full. And when elections come around, you have at least enough candidates to fill the seat, if not to have a competitive election, which is always fun. Do your board members regularly attend meetings? Do your individual members have the capacity to do their work? Do 2/3 of the board members regularly do X amount of work each month? And that varies from co-op to co-op. So your 10 might be higher or lower depending on where you're at, but to do the work. Next up, annual review of the number of seats on the board. And that's just looking at, is the number of board members we have, does it match the work that we need to do? Are there too many of us and it's really clunky to get stuff done because there's too many people weighing in? Are there not enough of us and we're all really, really tired and need more help? So making sure you sometimes step back and just do a reality check on, do we have the right number of members? Do we need to increase or decrease that? And then finally, balanced as a board, just making sure that, like I said, 1 or 2 people are not doing all the work all the time, but everybody's kind of carrying their fair share, serving on committees, putting in the time to get your co-op built. Next. Next, we have the board development. And this kind of starts at the beginning with, do we have an onboarding or an orientation process for our new members? Are we doing annual retreats to give an opportunity for the boards to come together and grow as a board and learn new skills and go deeper in their experience? Are you spending time, if you're a policy governance board, and even if you're not, on developing the policies and doing governance activities and things so you can continue to learn on a regular basis? Do you have an active board recruitment process? Are you, filling up that pipeline so when the election rolls around, you've got some great candidates to choose from who've been engaged and understand what the work of the board is? Or if you unfortunately have an unexpected vacancy, you've got some candidates ready to step in and make sure the board has enough members. And are you not board loading? Is there one person who's controlling the board by loading all their friends on it and filling it up with yes men, so you don't have a board that represents a diversity of opinion and really represents your co-op? On the next one is policies and roles. This is pretty straightforward. Do you have job descriptions for your officers and know what they're accountable for? Are you actually voting for your board officers, and is that done anonymously so people feel the freedom to vote honestly? Do you have attendance policies for your board members, and where are those, and do you hold people accountable to them? What's your board decision-making process, and are you using it consistently? And do you have a code of conduct and review it regularly? And of course, the annual board work calendar. Does the board know what their work is? Are they getting it done on time? And is that really guiding the arc of your work together as a board every year? Board dynamics. Jacqueline, I'm doing a lot of talking. Do you want to take this one?
Sure. So one thing I do want to mention is you're listening to all this. I think this part of what comes with looking at the survey is sometimes groups might go, oh my God. And we're first going to give you tips at the end on how to use the tool. And we are going to talk about how to prioritize where you want to focus, where you need to improve. So for those of you who are having that kind of overwhelm moment, we're halfway through this kind of listing the stuff piece, and then we're really going to get a lot more into how to use it. So board dynamics is all about like how we interact with each other. And while board dynamics are always important, I love looking at all these through the lens of where you're going to have to be at once you have a GM. So first, we want to make sure board discussions are direct and open and respectful. Sometimes what we see, of course, is there should never be any insulting or yelling. And I'm amazed by how many boards, so I'm going to say this again, some people laugh when I do this one. I'm amazed by how many boards I've had to tell that no, it really is completely unacceptable if there are any insulting or any yelling going on. That is not acceptable on a board. And some of you luckily have never run into this, but I'm amazed by how many boards that have. But that's the most dramatic, right? You're like, oh yeah, we don't have yelling or insulting. Okay, cool. So are you comfortable as a board debating decisions? Like actually kicking around ideas, point, counterpoint, giving some different perspectives. What we see sometimes is that boards are so into the concept of consensus that actually what it is there's one or two voices that the board tends to follow, and they don't really get into dialogues. And you're going to have to get comfortable with that. When a general manager shows up, part of their job and your job is to respectfully push a little back and forth on certain concepts, ideas, and strategies. If you can't do that amongst yourself as a board, you're certainly not gonna be able to do it with your GM effectively. So if we use that lens, are you guys comfortable debating stuff? Can you say things can you say, I'm not sure I agree with that, and back it up? Is that a comfortable thing that can be done respectfully? Do you know which officer is responsible if there is a conflict? And do you handle it? This one comes up a lot. Sometimes a conflict comes out of nowhere on the board, and it kind of just gets left there because no one knows who's supposed to handle it, where it's supposed to be handled, who's in charge of it. Conflict is a natural part of leadership. It's going to happen. Do you know who's in charge if it happens? Do you know who's responsible to help work through that situation? Does your board speak with one voice? This is a board dynamic issue. I'm not going to make you raise hands, but how many people have had a board where certain board members go and express opinions to owners outside of meetings that are not necessarily in alignment with the board, who might say things like, well, we decided X, but I'm not sure what I think about that. I would have done it this way. That is a board dynamic problem. The board makes a decision together through a democratic process, and they respect that process. If there are problems within the board with a decision, with dynamics of the board, that is handled within the board. And some people say, well, what if the board's going completely off the rails? Well, if that happens, then you leave the board and you lead the owner insurrection, okay? But like, if you really think your co-op's in jeopardy, but the board should be speaking with one voice and keeping board issues in board meetings, and that no board members dominate. And everyone here has served on a board where somebody actually really dominated the board. We pretended that we were all making our own decisions, but really kind of the one person was making decisions. And if you've got that going on in your board, there's work to be done.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Next up, time use. This is all about, again, your board members are volunteers. You want to use their time wisely and show that basic courtesy and respect to them. So are you staying on agenda in the meetings? You're not rambling all over the place and getting into minutia and small details, but sticking with the agenda. The agenda process, is it out in advance so people have time to review the information before they come to the board meeting, so they're ready to go to work and take the conversation to the next level? You're not spending the meeting reading the notes, reading the reports for the first time, or trying to get up to speed. Because really then you're wasting everybody else's time, or the people who did their homework, right? Do board members come to meetings prepared? This is related with having that agenda in time so you can be prepared. This next one is important as we begin to work with the general manager, who's going to be taking over all the operational details, and a particularly important thing as we're moving from a working board where you've had your fingers in everything and you know everything that's going on and are making all the decisions, down to, one of you is probably thinking about the exact wording for every email that goes out or the exact colors you're using on stuff. As your GM comes on board, you are going to need to hand some of that stuff over, and you can't be micromanaging the details anymore. So as a board member, it's knowing, are we kind of participating at the right level of detail, right?
I would also say that one refers to, as you guys get moving faster, some of you were in like stage 2B, stage 3, everything's gone slow forever, and all of a sudden lots of things have to happen really fast and lots of decisions are happening. You have to trust your board enough that if you can't be at every board meeting, they can still have it. We can't go, oh, can't have the board meeting because Jacqueline can't be there. She needs to be part of this decision. If the other 8 board members can be there and get the work done and it's timely, then you trust them to do that. If a committee is assigned work, you trust them to do what the committee was assigned to do. You're not micromanaging from the board level and saying, I have to be there for every decision or it didn't count. I think some of you know what I'm talking about. This happens on board.
Yeah, and you're right, it's not just with the GM, it's as you start moving down the track. At the beginning, you kind of work the process sequentially. You're all focused on one thing at a time. And as you move down the path, suddenly there's 3 or 4 different things that different people on the board are off doing, and you're coming back together and making the strategic decisions and shaping how your co-op's going to develop. And there's all these things happening at the same time. So it's something you kind of grow into and learn, but it's going to accelerate as you get closer to opening, and then the dynamic will continue as you move forward with your GM. And then the other time use, start on time, end on time. The Germanic heritage in me always appreciates that. Next slide.
Sure.
Back one, I believe. I think responsibility is our last one. Okay, so the next section we're going to look at is accountability and delegation. And this is, first of all, just making sure we're tracking everything. If board members are assigned a task, are we keeping track of who said they were going to do it, and then making sure we circle back to see if it was done. It's really easy to integrate that into an agenda format or into an agenda template, and then just make it a natural part of every board meeting. You're kind of creating the sentinel effect there as well. If people know someone's going to ask about it, you're more likely to get it done, right? Whereas if you know they don't even remember you said you do that, it's easy for you to forget as well. Our board members completing their assigned tasks, are they actually doing the work? And the self-assessment process, plus building work plans from the results to help us improve. We'll touch on this a little bit more at the end, but as your board goes through this self-assessment process, discovers area where you might need to practice and build some more muscle, we encourage boards to build a plan to figure out how to get better in any areas where they might have some opportunities to grow. So are you doing that? As you come back the second time or the third time to check in on yourself, are your numbers changing in those areas where you're trying to get stronger? Do your committees have charters that outline their responsibilities and the resources? And this is an early way to start practicing the delegation skills you're going to be using with your GM. Are you setting clear expectations about what they're supposed to go out to do? And are you giving them the tools and skills and resources that they need to accomplish those goals? And practicing that with your committees is a great way to start. Are you hearing reports back from your committees? If you've set up a committee and empowered them to go do something, are you checking in to make sure they're actually doing it? And what type of reporting process do you have? And again, this is great kind of early practice for working with your GM and the policy governance reporting process. And then secondly, do you have active oversight of your contractor relationship? And first of all, contractors are often expensive and they're doing important work. So making sure you know who they are and what they're doing and that they're getting the work done that you need them to do to help your co-op move forward. So just making sure you're managing them well, which again gives you the experience and the practice to manage your GM once they come on board.
And I want to point out to anyone who has a question, that's specifically your consultants. And I think sometimes board members in startup food co-ops, we defer a lot to the consultants. I mean, we're paying them for a reason. They're experts at stuff we don't know. But part of your job is actually to make sure that they're accountable to the contract, that you're getting what you need, that you're getting it in a timely manner, that they're meeting the expectations of the contract. I'm amazed how often I hear from startups after they've completed a contract with a consultant that that their needs weren't met, or that there were issues and they never really kept track of those and communicated them back. So part of this practicing your board muscle is actually is practicing oversight of those contracts and those consulting relationships and making sure your co-op's getting what they need out of them.
All right, and final section, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to best use the tool. But the final section here is your responsibility to owners. So again, you as the board are elected by the owners. The real power in the co-op resides with the owners, because if they don't become owners, if they don't invest in the capital campaign, if they don't shop at the store, you're not going to have a co-op. So that's really where the power in the co-op lives. One member, one vote, those are our principles. You as the board are elected as their representatives, and making sure that you're meeting the responsibilities with, do you have an annual meeting where you're giving them updates on the progress towards starting your co-op and updates on your financials? Particularly the financial piece, once the store gets opened, they're going to kind of want to know what's happening with their store, and being able to have experience being comfortable talking about that and being able to speak to that before the store opens is really helpful. You'll have lots of experience with this during your capital campaign, as people are, asking questions about every element of the store and how it's all coming together. Are your board meetings announced in advance? And this is assuming, of course, that your members are welcome to come to your board meetings, which I guess we made that as an assumption.
Well, they should be. The reason this is in here is because we're amazed how many startups don't announce their board meetings or make it possible for owners to join them. And that should it's not only desirable, it's often in the bylaws that you have to do it. And a lot of startups don't. So.
Yeah, so making sure your meetings are announced in advance in a place where it's easy for members to find, and that you're, getting the word out that members are welcome to join meetings as well. An owner input process at meetings, is that used consistently? And, is it part of the agenda? There's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however much time where owners can actually give input at the board meetings. And, there's super easy ways to integrate that if you don't have it already. But are you hearing from your members? Are you giving them a platform to be able to share their thoughts and concerns and to hear from your board members in a structured and a systematized way? Do you post board meeting minutes within 15 days of them being approved? I think this might vary, Jacqueline, from place to place if they legally have to be, but it's a good practice that we recommend just for transparency and visibility and keeping, you know, your owners and your members engaged with what's happening with their co-op.
I think it's a lot to transparency. It's one of those things you're like, nobody reads them anyway. But if you don't do it, it creates the sense of a lack of transparency, which can be just deadly for co-ops. And I know some of you are panicking right now going, make the minutes public. Again, of the open session, not of the closed session of the board meetings. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. You do not have to put out the public minutes for your closed session. Some people say within 15 days, 30 days in some bylaws in some states, but it is a responsibility of the co-op and almost any co-op statute that you actually put the minutes out where owners can find them.
And there's also a right way and a wrong way to write minutes. So if you know, if you have someone who's capturing every single thing every single person says, that's not what needs to be reported out to the owners. So check that as well. On your website, is there clear information for owners who, if they have questions or concerns for the board about how they can reach out to the board? Is it easy to find? Is there some way for them to have a direct way to reach out to the board? And again, this is just opening the channels of communication, transparency, and openness, and making yourselves available to your owners who are your constituents at the end of the day. All right, so that was your whirlwind tour of the board self-assessment tool. Those are the categories and the questions that we've assessed on. Why don't we just take a moment, because Cynthia had a great question about board diversity. What about board diversity so it reflects the cultural diversity of an area, such as McHenry County, which is 13 or 14% Latino. Jacqueline, did we miss this, or what are your thoughts on this?
We assessed it, and the reason, so I think it's a good point for us to go back and say that we recommend you ask yourself if this is a question for your board. Mm-hmm. Some boards are very committed to addressing this issue. Other boards are not. It kind of depends, and so we didn't see it as a universal. And I can give examples of co-ops where this is not so much of an issue. So we didn't see it as a universal, but good point. We should definitely make a note. And keep in mind, the board self-assessment tool exists for you we expect that you're going to adjust it. There are going to be some things that are specific to your co-op. And that's one that I think it'd be great for us to put in a note that we recommend you consider if this is something that needs to be added to that section for you, for sure.
Okay. And thank you for the question. It's questions like that and constantly refining our tools that make us all better. So thank you. Catherine, I agree with you. I think a lot of our boards do function better than our elected officials. So shout out on that.
Although that is a low bar.
Do most boards require members to be on at least one committee? That varies. Jacqueline, I might lob that one over your way.
Yeah, no, that varies a lot. I would say the majority of startups do require all board members serve on one committee, but it is not universal. It really depends. If you can, I think for starting committees, it's really good making sure that committee is functioning the way you want it to before you send it off into the stratosphere. But sometimes you can find committee chairs that are not on the board who can do excellent work, but quite often you end up poaching those people for the board. So it kind of becomes cyclical, and a lot of times the board, some board member ends up chairing almost every committee. And so often, yes, that is a recommendation, but some of you all don't do it. Is anyone here not board members don't have to serve on any additional committees? Does anyone have that? I can't really, I'm sorry, I've got the slides up, so I can't really see if you're waving your hand on mute.
Yeah, I don't think all of our members are on a committee. We have 13 board members, though. We have a big, gigantic board.
Yeah, you have a very big board. And so in that case, it kind of works, right? Like we don't have 13 committees, so that works out okay. Right. If you have 13 committees, we have a different problem.
We have an expectation that every board member serves on a committee. Now we have at least one who actually isn't doing anything with the committee, even though she's technically serving on it. But other than that, our board members are all pretty involved in the committees. And we may have a committee that has 2 board members on it pretty readily.
Mhm. And that does happen. I would say that it's ideal, actually, though. Keep in mind as you move into stage late, especially late 2B. There's going to be a lot to do, and hopefully you've strengthened your committees to the point that, I think there's going to come a point where some board members maybe don't belong on committees because they're doing so much board direct work. So you're, again, like as Kaye talked about, like that all of a sudden the tasks start overlapping really fast on the board. If we've built really strong committees, we shouldn't need more than 1 board member per committee. We should, and that doesn't always happen. I understand. Like, I'm not saying it to be perfect, but the ideal is that the committee can be filled without having multiple board members on it by the time we get to that stage, so we can free folks up to really focus on some of the governance transition work that is going to take over a lot of your time and energy.
All right. Next question then. Can you talk about how to set roles for members attending board meetings? Are most co-op board meetings open to members? I believe most are. And a good way to do that is to actually have just a little blurb on the top of your agenda, which basically says, all members are welcome to attend board meetings. We have a set agenda time where up to, we have 20 minutes set aside every meeting where up to 4 or 5 members can speak. You'll be given 5 minutes each, or however you want to set it up. This is a time for the board to hear from you. If you have questions, you may not get a response in the moment. Just manage their expectations that it's not going to be a dialogue. It's a comment time for them to share their thoughts and concerns, or yahoos and congratulations with the board. So you can actually, little block of text on the top of your meeting agenda that's available at the meeting that just sets everybody's expectations. If you have a lot of people who want to comment and you only have a certain amount of time, you might have a sign up in advance where if they want to speak in the meeting or speak during the owner comment section, they need to sign up 2 days before the board meeting, just so you guys can get organized and know how long that section's going to be, and to control the number of spots and the number of people speaking.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Also, Lee put something in the comments for Chicago Market and how they run it. This question comes up a lot, so really quickly going to address that. We're like, well, but what if, like, we want owners to feel welcome and like they can participate, and we do, but just please keep in mind, I always say this one, like if you've got 500 owners, no one owner has the right to take up the board's time from the very precious minimal hours you have to do your work. And so when you're running your agenda, that conversation needs to stay at the board level. So you want to have an owner input session before or after the board's work that is isolated from that and that is run in a systematic way so everyone has an opportunity. But I strongly recommend, I rarely do that, you know me, I'm like, you could do it, strongly recommend against having owners be allowed to participate in the active part of the board meeting. And if you have questions about that, we can discuss that further offline.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to include in your little text blurb, and then say something, after the owner comment section, the board will, do its work. Members are welcome to observe, but please remain silent so they can complete their agenda in a timely manner. Something like that.
Hey, Kaye, I wonder if we could pull back and talk about how to use the tool, because these are great questions and we could do this all night, but I want to make sure people walk away with some understanding of how to work the tool.
Okay, so using the tool, get a copy to each of your board members, ask them to complete it, rate each item, scale of 1 to 10. There's a place for notes if they want to comment on something. Get those all back. They're done anonymously. We really want people to be honest here. So don't have them sign names, do it anonymously. And then you can do it if you have a board consultant. It's sometimes good to give it to them because they're completely objective and they can pull it all together for you, or have people on your governance committee, possibly likely the chair of the board, take a look at all the answers. I usually make a grid in a spreadsheet, all the individual scores, average them up for each point, and then look at the average for each section. And then because I'm a numbers and a spreadsheet geek, I also look at the spread. What was the lowest score? What was the highest score? And you can just look at the pure numeric values and go, okay, this section were a 3, this section were a 10. So if we're looking at where we need to work, I think we need to focus on the area where we all scored ourselves a 3. If you see, you're going to always have a little bit of a spread just because there's optimists and pessimists in the world, right? And we all view things differently. But for the most part, you should get a sense of where most of the board thinks we're struggling, or what are those issues and those opportunities where we need to pay a little bit more attention and focus a little bit more. The spread is interesting as well because it lets you see, are most board members kind of experiencing this question or this concern or this opportunity in the same way? Do we all think we're doing doing everything right? You know, all the things that we're getting right. Do we all agree that we're getting those right? And just get a sense of how an alignment your board is. Jacqueline.
Yeah, well, I would say that sometimes the spread is the most interesting to me because it brings out some conversations you've been needing to have. We've often seen this, and I know actually we worked through some of this tool. This tool was first formed in a much smaller version through FCI, and then Firebrand helped completely rebuild it. And I used it with Bethlehem Food Co-op, who's on a lot of that board has transitioned. But we did this, and then we looked at, and the spread pointed out some places where the board maybe hadn't had some conversations that they needed to have, or certain people didn't feel safe saying certain things. And I remember, you know, those were the really rich places. And this isn't an example from Bethlehem, but where, you know, one place like, you know, we can have healthy, respectful debates in board meetings and do often. If you've got a bunch of scores in the 8 and 9, and then like a two, like there's a couple twos, we've got a conversation to be had, right? That means somebody doesn't think that they can speak openly in board meetings, doesn't think that we can have healthy debate, although the majority does. If we've got a couple people over here, that spread is indicative that we need to have a convo. So you're not just going to be looking for you're going to look for where you scored high and where you scored low, get a clear picture of where you're strong and where you're weak and where you might need to focus. But we're looking for those, and this game, Kaye pointed this out, I think it's brilliant. You're looking for those spreads. You're looking for where we don't have alignment. Sometimes, and this happened in Bethlehem because we had a different understanding of the question. Great, cool. But quite often there's something that maybe brand new board members are experiencing very different than long-term board members, or some things people were afraid to say. And those are the places that we need to carefully and respectfully lean in and have some conversations.
So pull the data together, you know, kind of add up your scores. And like I said, I like to do them per question, but also per section, just to kind of get a sense of how we're doing on each of those broad categories and more of an overview. And then we'd encourage you to do this at least once a year, and keep your scores and look back and see your progress and celebrate your successes. And then from this, we would, you know, when I use it in board retreats, what I do is I integrate it into their work plan. You know, what's the board's work this year? What are they focusing on ahead? Well, the board assessment survey said, you know what, we've really got to work on getting agendas out ahead of time. People aren't coming to meetings prepared because they get stuff at the last minute and everybody's time is being wasted. You know what, we can fix that pretty easily. So let's make sure we're intentional about that, put that in our board work plan. And then, you know, hold yourselves accountable to it, right? Practicing those delegation and accountability skills. So that's kind of how I use this with boards when I use it in retreats and with boards I'm working at. Jacqueline, other thoughts on usage or tips for co-ops?
I think my top tip is just boards tend to take this assessment and they focus on, oh my God, there are 7 places we scored low and we have all this work to do. And I would say first, pause. The biggest value out of this process, I would say, and that's controversial, but I think it's the biggest, is the conversation you're going to have as a board about where you're strong and you're weak and getting in alignment. So let's get that done. If you get just that done, then you're light years ahead of where you were. But then two, don't panic and make a list of 20 things you need to fix.
Right.
What we're looking for are where are the places that you really need to improve that could create the most bang for your buck. Because you definitely could make a list after taking this survey of 20 things you need to do better. and that's not what we want to come out of this. If you come up, in my opinion, with 2, you can go for 3 or 4, but if you realistically only have the capacity to go after 2 things that you found that are really need fixing and make a plan and go after those things and then add more things once you've gotten past it, then do that. If you only change maybe 2 core things that are going on in your board culture, your board ability to do its role, and really get it done and get it done well, you will see a big lift in your board's functioning. I don't even care which points they are. I've seen this again and again. So I was like, great, I created a list of 20 things we're going to fix, and we're going to do 3 in March, and we're going to do 5 in April. And I'm like, and then none of them get done, and everyone is overwhelmed. You don't have to be perfect. What we're looking for you to see is where you could improve, agree on what's the most important things to improve, and start there. That would be my biggest tip.
Exactly. So somebody asked, once the results are tallied, would you normally present to discuss at a normal board meeting? I've always used this tool in the context of a board retreat. So I have the board take it before the retreat. It's also a great way for a consultant to get to know your board. And then I usually run through it kind of using the slides I did earlier, where we look at each category and each question. And I just highlight the ones that for some reason I thought we should talk about as a board. So we don't go, we don't spend an hour going through all of this like we're doing now. We maybe spend half an hour kind of highlighting some of the key things, having some of those honest conversations if you need to, and giving those the time and the space they need. But like I said, being really kind of proactive and, okay, from this, what are the things we want to focus on, and how do we integrate this into our board work for next year?
If you're doing it without a consultant, I'll mention real fast, I think you should still do it beforehand. It should be set up. If you have a governance committee, you should have your governance committee set up this survey. Otherwise, it'll probably fall to the board chair or vice chair. Let people take it anonymously beforehand, tabulate, but still someone or someone's should take responsibility for doing kind of to the best of their ability, highlighting where there were a lot of strength, a lot of weakness, or a lot of difference of opinion, and getting that back to the board before the meeting so everyone gets to see that and knows this is where the board chair, whoever worked in this, says, look, we're going to focus on these ones. Here's like the ones we have a lot of room to improve. These are the ones we have a lot of difference of opinion. We're not going to like comb the whole thing for 4 hours in person. It is a terrific thing to do with an outside consultant. I agree. I usually use it that way too, Kaye, and I think it provides space to have conversations that can otherwise be tough, but you can do it on your own and run a pretty similar process, but you'll just need to put someone in charge of it.
Yep, and that was really our goal in kind of creating the tool and sharing it out in this meeting, is just to, equip you guys with something fairly simple in a way to, so you can kind of check in, do your own self-assessment, and have a sense of your strength as a startup food co-op board. Jacqueline, where should we go from here?
Well, we got a couple questions here. It seems like one would, so what about new board members coming in? It seems like they would need time to be ready to assess. I have some thoughts on that, but what are yours, Kaye?
Well, mine is if you have brand new board members, like I'm about to use this in a retreat this weekend, actually, with some people who aren't even on the board yet. They've been voted in, but they haven't actually started. I'm not going to include them just because they have no experience and nothing meaningful to contribute. So ideally, you'd want it to be with people who've been on the board, maybe at least 6 months or so. What are your thoughts, Jacqueline? We haven't actually talked about this.
We haven't, and interestingly, 6 months is great. I'm actually okay with it at 3 months, only because I have seen some really great conversations come out of new board members going, wow, that wasn't my experience at all. There was an onboarding process, or wow, I don't feel like I can contribute to the conversation. I sure feel like Jacqueline and Kaye can, and sometimes it's better to get those voices in there early and hear what's going on. So I think if they've been serving at least 3 months, they have something to contribute. But I agree with Kaye. Yeah, newly elected people need to watch the process and soak in what's going on.
Yeah, and there, in your defense, there may even be an advantage to having someone who's relatively new to the board and still somewhat objective. Over time, you just kind of get sucked into the norms and this is how it always is type thing. So having those fresh voices, which usually isn't an issue, with people coming on and off boards and board transition, there's usually new voices to help keep things fresh.
So one thing I'm going to, someone asked, and this is back to specific sections. So you guys were asking questions from specific sections, which I'm fine now, Kaye, if you are. I think we've talked about how to utilize it. We did have a question from Kim at Suncoast. she said, do people have board policy register I could look at? And I was trying to figure out, she does not mean policy governance. There's a policy governance boilerplate version of policies out there when you're doing that work. I think you're meaning, Kim, and you can unmute, more kind of functioning policies, agreements as a working board. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know, we have a few, like we did a purchasing and contracting, policy, and but I know like we need a conflict of interest one. So, more of a board functioning sorts of policies, committee policies, those kinds of things. So I appreciate Whitewater posted, gave a link to some of theirs. But that's what I was just wondering. And rather than, going online and looking for something, which I could do, but I was wondering if anybody had examples they're willing to share.
Yay, P6 it.
Yeah.
I think the conflict of interest, and then even just a code of conduct saying, hey, we speak respectfully to each other. We don't shout or yell. Those types of things can be really important, particularly for new members, just to kind of guide their integration with the board.
Mm-hmm.
I also have Prairie food co-ops. Would multiple people find it useful for me to send kind of board functioning policies? I'll just send it with the email.
Okay.
So for policies, and those are internal functioning policies. Some of you have more detailed ones than others, but I'll send those. And Whitewater gave the link to theirs, so you can just go ahead and jump on and get theirs right now. So you'll see that in the chat.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? We can go back and look at some of the specific sections. I know some of you had questions in them and I pulled you out of it, but I wanted to make sure you knew how to use the tool. Were there other questions folks had that came up out of what you saw and what will be covered in the survey? Okay.
It looked like maybe Kimberly was talking, or maybe she's talking to somebody else. Kimberly Culbertson?
I think Kimberly might be talking to someone else.
Okay.
See you, Sala, hopefully in May at Up and Coming. Okay, well, I'm curious about public minutes versus actual minutes. I wonder if that was going to come up. Okay, Kaye, you're the master at minutes. You want to talk about this?
Sure. Well, first of all, you might be having, some of you may, or how many of you know about executive session? Anybody using that in their boards or using, okay, a lot of you do. Okay, so you have an open session of the board meeting where members can attend. And then because we're dealing with things like site selection and raising money and hiring people, there's a lot of things that we can't speak about publicly in front of our members. So a lot of food co-op boards have a regular executive session as part of their board meetings where it's just the board. And those minutes, the secretary should be taking minutes in those, but they are not part of the public minutes that you post for your owners. So that's, I guess the public minutes will just be of the open session of the board meeting. And then I believe you're required to keep the executive session minutes for kind of like just a historical record or for like state purposes. Is that right, Jacqueline? But those should never be posted publicly.
Yeah, they have to be available to the state if they ever ask for them, and they have to be available for legal reasons if you ever have any legal issues. So they have to exist, but they don't have to be public.
Right.
So, and are people clear on what you put in executive session and what you don't? Okay, I got a lot of nods, so I think most people are okay on that question.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have questions about that, please don't be shy about it. Reach out to me. We can talk about it. It's not intuitive at first. A lot of boards either don't want to put anything in executive session or they put too much in executive session. So make sure you do understand how it's supposed to be used.
Right. And if you don't currently use an executive session, I do encourage you to just make it a practice. Even if you go into executive session, do we have anything to talk about? Nope. Okay, meeting adjourned. It's just a good, again, just a practice and a precedent to have, so that if you do have something that needs to go into an executive session, not everybody's radar is up. Oh my gosh, they did an executive session for the first time ever. What's going on, right? Just make it normal, and then the board has a bit more freedom to work.
Yeah, it's very important they're consistent. There was a question, and it said, Cynthia's like, you can go on about that. I just want to check if people don't have questions about other topics first before we just keep going on this thread. Because there were lots of different things that were covered in the different sections that people might have questions about. I will say the biggest thing to be aware of when you decide to do this is that if you run it yourself, if you don't have someone external who can run it, sometimes people don't feel like they can be as honest, especially if the board chair is the one getting the results. So think about, even if it's anonymous, so think about ways to mitigate that if at all possible, because we want the most honest, transparent conversation possible. Maybe you've just got an ex-board member who would be willing to kind of facilitate the process or something like that. So keep that in mind. But do members ever complain when you ask them to leave for executive session? I've never had that happen. Anyone had that happen? Because I'm open to hearing it. Has anyone ever felt like owners feel, yeah.
I think it's in how you frame it up. If people know what it is, so it's not a mystery, I think most people would be compliant with that.
We do it at the beginning, and then we
Oh.
don't invite them until after the executive session time. That's what we do.
Interesting. Sometimes things pop up during the meeting that need to go to exec, but of course you could always reopen exec at the end. You could do it at the beginning and then say, oh, something popped up, so we'll be staying 10 minutes after. You know, you can always do that. So I think it's kind of an interesting solution as well. A lot of times it's just on the agenda that, you know, this is the owner portion, and then, you know, it's all clear from the start. But I've never heard any objections to it. On the rare occasion I think you'd get them. You know, there are troublemakers in every crowd. Sometimes you got to deal with it. But generally, as long as you're really giving people transparent access to important stuff, like if you have a big controversy going on at your co-op and you don't have a place for owners to give their voice, then they're going to have a problem with the closed session, right? You know, so, but if you're giving them space when stuff comes up, I've never seen an objection. All right. I got a couple others of you who've offered, who've sent me some policies and stuff. I will try and group them all together and put them out with the email. You will be getting a copy of the tool tonight via email. And because everyone asks, the videos from all of the FCI lives will be available a week from tomorrow. I will get them up and organized on our YouTube, and I will email you, and I will post it in the Facebook groups, and you will know it's available, okay? So we will have them out there. If there, I think, where do you post agendas? Real quick, Kaye, before you wrap up.
Different co-ops do it different ways. Some put them out in advance of the meeting. Some of them are just like, you know, if you come back in the days when you came to meetings in person, we just used to have them as a handout when you walked in the room. So it kind of depends on how you want to do it. Ideally, you're getting those done at least a few days before the meeting. So posting them would be a great thing, I think, just so members can see what's on the agenda and decide if they want to come to the meeting. But it can be handled different ways.
And I would say a lot of, someone actually puts it in their Facebook announcement of the board meeting, and I think it's cool. It's the agenda.
Yeah.
You don't put the closed part on there, but I think it might be Whitewater. It was just real quick. If staff is expected to attend board meetings, pre-GM staff, we expected, I would say recommended. I think that anyone who's working for you on any major portion of the co-op needs to know what's going on. Like you don't want to have an average craner who doesn't understand what's going on with project development, with business development, and vice versa. So it's recommended, but if it's not all the time, that's fine. But I think it is a problem when the staff member is rarely attending. Personally, anyone have a different experience or view on that? All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. As you guys know, I will stay a few minutes after in case anyone has extra questions, but I want to take a minute and thank Kaye from Firebrand Cooperative, who donated her time to be here with us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. It is my absolute pleasure. It's fun seeing you all again.